Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're here at the Hollywood Museum in the historic Max Factor building, and our guests today are 2 authors, Lou Ureneck and Maral Boydjian. Author Lou Ureneck was born and raised in New Jersey. He attended Harvard University as a Nieman Fellow and was the editor of the Portland Press Herald. He was the deputy managing editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and he's the author of 3 books. And besides that, you're a professor at the University of Boston University, which is fantastic. It's so beautiful.
It's great to be here. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. So when did your writing career take off as opposed to your journalism career?
Yeah, for most of my journalism career, I was an editor. And it wasn't until I came to BU at Boston University that I began writing seriously. And
is that when you started?
Yes, that's right. I got a late start.
Really?
Yes.
I know, and you wrote 500 pages. Wow, it's a heavy book to carry.
I've written 3 books since I've been to Boston University. I've written
Why did you start so late?
Well, you know, I had always wanted to be a writer. It was my first aspiration. But, you know, I was raising a family. I needed to make some money, so I became an editor. And I got so engaged in the work of being an editor, there really wasn't time for my own writing.
You teach journalism. How is that different from being an author?
Yeah, well, it's a lot different. You know, the work of an author is really very solitary. You're alone in a room with your thoughts and your research and your screen, and you're working away. It's work that I enjoy, but you know, as a teacher, I'm working with students, and it's a collaborative mentoring process. It's very different, but they're both satisfying.
It's very different, and also when journalism takes a different, you can't make up any other story.
No, absolutely.
Like as an author, you can make up what you want.
Well, I didn't make up anything for any of my books. They're all nonfiction books, and this book in particular is very well sourced and footnoted and noted.
But if you were writing a novel.
Yeah, if I were writing a novel, I'd be writing fiction. I would make it up. But we don't do that in journalism, of course, nor do we do it in history.
No, we don't. So you did write A Cabin, Two Brothers. What is that story about?
It's a story.
Is it named Cabin?
It's named Cabin, that's right. It's really the story of a relationship, the relationship I have with my brother, Paul.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So it's like a memoir in a way.
Absolutely. He and I built a cabin together in Maine. And over the course of a year. So I tell the story of the cabin's construction, but really I'm telling the story of 2 brothers and our growing up together and coming apart and then coming back together again. And I think the world of my brother. So it's a book that I enjoyed writing.
Oh, wow. And then Bookcast?
Backcast.
Backcast. I'm sorry, it won the outdoor, that's what I was going to say.
Right,
yeah, it won the outdoor National Outdoor Book
Award.
Exactly,
that's right. And Backcast is the story of another relationship. It's the relationship I have with my son. And I wrote that book. I had just come through a divorce. And I had a very troubled relationship at the time with my son, who was a teenager. He was angry and upset, and he had every right to be. You know, he had just been through a very difficult passage. So he and I went on a fishing trip and a rafting trip together, alone in Alaska, very dangerous and remote part of Alaska.
How old was he at the time?
17. And
he could have pushed you over, right?
Well, I think he wanted to. And a couple of times he came very close. He had a miserable time.
But he did?
Oh, yeah. He did not want to be with me in Alaska. But it helped us rebuild some bridges and communication and so forth. So it also was a very satisfying book to write.
That must have been very difficult.
It was. It was
because
a difficult time.
Because you have to put the truth down, and the truth is so wrenching at times,
Absolutely, and it is the truth, and it's revealing, and it was painful at times, but it was also, I wanted to order the experience, to understand the experience that I had just been through. It was, you know, devastating.
But
And
you never did that kind of, go through that kind of feeling as a journalist.
no.
I don't
No,
think, I mean,
no.
I'm a journalist too, and I don't ever feel like what you're talking about, memoir, honesty, family relations.
No, it's an anathema to journalism. You know, we're dealing with facts and other people's stories and news events.
And trying to be
even-handed and so forth. We don't reveal our own lives. We stay out of the story.
Exactly.
All of that. So, so those two books really were a big transition for me into something that I wanted to do for a very long time, and so I feel very fortunate to be at the university, so I have time to do this work.
Oh, so you can write. Well, I don't know when
I'm
you
expected to write, yeah.
I don't know when you write if you're at the university teaching all the time.
Well, you know,
and that's in Boston, which is so great,
it's great.
right? Right in the heart of.
You know, as a professor is expected to write, so it's sort of part of the job, and it gets integrated into the daily life of that kind of work.
Before we talk about The Great Fire, which is this heavy 500-page book, tell me about your Fulbright situation, because you were in Kiev, I guess.
That's right. I taught at the National University at Kiev. It was a great experience. Met lots of really wonderful young Ukrainian students who wanted to be journalists. They see themselves as nation builders. The country is in tumult. You know, there's a lot of problems, right?
Were you in contact with any of these people during this tumult?
Oh, absolutely. I remain in contact. And I came back not only with a great experience, but while I was there, actually in the follow-up to being there, I met a very wonderful woman, and I came back with a wife.
No.
Yes.
Is that right?
And she's right here today in the studio.
How wonderful.
Yes.
Well, we love the Ukraine.
Yeah. And so, you know, it was a great, it couldn't have been better, you know.
Did you speak Russian?
I do not, no, yet.
Yeah, but the National University is where? Right in the center?
Yeah, it is. And it's divided into parts. And I was in a part of the university called Mohila College, which is a prestigious, you know, really one of the best. It's a medieval university, goes very back far in time, you know, and it has an excellent faculty.
And they're so proud, aren't they? They're very proud people.
Absolutely. And so I met wonderful faculty, terrific students. I had a great experience.
How long were you there?
Well, maybe 9 months.
Well, long enough to find a wife. Good for you. But with The Great Fire, you're also dealing with a part of the country that has wonderful people.
That's right. You know, I made many trips to Turkey, 5 trips to Turkey, numerous trips to Greece.
But Syria?
Yeah, I didn't get to Syria.
Oh, you didn't get to Syria?
No, no. I got into the interior of Anatolia, you know, deeply into Turkey, but not as far as Syria. No.
Oh, I thought that this brought us down. Then you're going to have to tell us what the whole story is, because The Great Fire, which is published by HarperCollins.
Smyrna, I think you're thinking of Smyrna. Yes.
I was.
Right.
So tell us the story. What kind of research did you have to do?
A lot of research. I spent 4 years, more than 20 libraries, and in 5 different countries, excuse me, and lots of travel. You know, I went, as I say, to Greece and Turkey. But interestingly, most of the good information about the burning of Smyrna, you know, that very devastating
I think
episode.
I was thinking of Aleppo or something.
Yeah, well, it's easy to get those two confused. Smyrna was the burning and the slaughter at Smyrna was the concluding event in the genocide that swept over Turkey. It lasted 10 years, from 1912.
The Armenian genocide.
Absolutely. And the Armenian genocide is inside this larger Christian genocide. Greeks, Armenians, and Assyrians were all targeted by the Ottoman and then later the nationalist government for death. I mean, it was horrible. It was a genocide. And so Smyrna is the final violent episode of that genocide. And we had American ships at Smyrna at the time.
Was it 1925 then?
22.
22.
September 1922.
Okay.
And we had American officers there who took very good records. So most of the research that was really useful turned out to be in Washington, at the Library of Congress and at the National Archives.
And how did that information get there? Through our ambassadors or through the
Partly,
United States?
the diplomatic cables between Constantinople, Smyrna, and Washington are there.
And what's Smyrna now
But
called?
more importantly, I mean, it was the ship traffic. It was the naval officers who kept records. Today, it's called Izmir. It's a modern Turkish city. There's no longer any Christian population. The Armenians and the Greeks are gone from Smyrna. At the time, it was a
It's on the water, right?
It's on the Aegean Sea,
I
right?
see. Okay.
Very beautiful city. At the time, it was a majority Christian city inside the Ottoman Empire. Greeks and Armenians were the largest segment of the population. There were also Muslims and Jews and so-called Levantines.
And everyone got together. Everyone got along together.
That's right. It was a
time.
cosmopolitan city.
Yes.
It was a kind of tolerant, liberal city-state inside the Ottoman Empire. The richest city in the empire, maybe the richest city in the Mediterranean.
Is Smyrna was?
That's right.
Is it across from Constantinople?
It's down the coast. It's on the same latitude as Athens. It's, you know, the Turkish peninsula sticks out into the Mediterranean, and it's right at the very sort of midway down the western coast of Turkey. And so it was a very special place, Smyrna. When it was burned by the Turkish army, it represented really the end of a cosmopolitan city and this place of toleration and so forth. And it ushered in not only tremendous suffering, it was really the end of the Ottoman Empire, symbolically.
Did they burn everyone in the city or just burn the city down?
Well, both. There were many people who survived the fire, and this is the story that I tell. It's an extraordinary story. I think of it as one of the great stories of an American hero that nobody knows about. Well, there was an American there who put together a rescue operation. He saved 250,000 lives.
Wow.
These were people who were destined to be killed by the Turkish army. They were going to be marched into the interior, but and this is without giving away too much of the book, this is the story I tell, how he put together a flotilla, worked with a very brave U.S. naval officer who skirted his orders, and the two of them arranged this evacuation, saved the lives of 250,000 people.
Wow. And that's part of this story.
That's the spine of the story, right. Asa Jennings and Halsey Powell, two Americans at the center of the book.
Do you cover the Armenian genocide?
Absolutely. You know, the Armenian genocide occurred...
Since I'm Armenian, I want to know about that.
It's very important, and it's all wrapped up together. You know, the Armenian, horrible thing, 1.5 million people were slaughtered. Either they were executed immediately or taken on long marches and died of thirst and disease and hunger, rape. It was just horrible.
I think that's why, because they were like being marched
Moved
out
to
Syria.
That's right.
Why I was thinking
of that. And a very few survived and ended up at Aleppo. That's probably why you've thought of that.
Then how did Smyrna end up like that? Because there was that kind of population there?
Well, as I say, it was a majority Christian population
so
with many
Armenians.
Armenians.
They went
That's
after
right.
anything?
So the Turkish army entered the city on September 9, 1922, and first turned on the Armenian quarter. The city was in districts, and they killed, looted, raped the Armenian population. It was really just horrible. And then several days later, on Wednesday, September 13, the city was set on fire by the Turkish army. There were 300,000 refugees in the city at the time who had fled the Turkish army. So they were sleeping in the streets and the railroad stations and the churchyards, and they were all driven to the waterfront by this very big fire. The fire was 2 miles long.
That was the Great Fire?
That's right. 2 miles long and a mile deep, and it drove hundreds of thousands of people onto a very narrow quay, a kind of promenade along the Smyrna waterfront. And they were being killed by the Turkish army. Their clothes were catching on fire. It was just a horrible and hellish scene. It lasted for 3 days. The fire went out. When it was out, there was no food, very little water, and lots of disease.
Just a siege.
It was terrible, yes, and it was the biggest story in the world at the time. It led the New York Times for more than a week, London Times. The world was transfixed, but none of the governments, including the United States, was willing to do anything to save the people at Smyrna. So it took a private individual, my hero, Asa Jennings.
Asa.
A very unlikely guy. You know, he was a little guy, a failed minister, big round glasses that magnified his eyes. He had a sort of a crooked back and handicapped. But out of nowhere, Asa Jennings put together first a series of safe houses to protect women in Smyrna, and then later he worked with Halsey Pell, the naval officer, who more or less disobeyed his orders.
I started reading it, and it's like 500 pages, as I said, so it's heavy to take to bed
But it
with
goes
me.
fast, doesn't
it?
it?
Does go fast, and I'm so glad you came. Our time went fast today,
Yes,
too.
right. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Lou, and I loved all the archival photos in there, too.
Yes,
Those were
okay, great.
We'll be right back with author Maral Boydjian. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're back here at the Hollywood Museum, and our guest is author Maral Boydjian, who was born in Aleppo, raised in Southern California, attended LA Valley College, and the Merit College of Court Reporting, which is pretty interesting. She served as a preschool director at the Alex Pillabo School, and she's worn many hats in business and community endeavors. What kind of jobs did you do in the business world?
Well, my husband is an entrepreneur, so he does general construction for hospitals and medical facilities. In addition to that, we've invested in properties, so I'm the manager of those, and also we have an import business in Central California for granite and marble. So
you do all, what work? You do
the
office work?
I do.
You do all the office?
It's a two-man team.
But how did that come out of being a preschool director?
I am a chameleon. I have just accepted that fact. I do what I need to do. I love children. Actually, the principal at Alex Pillabo at that time needed a licensed director, and that was me. So I went to the rescue.
How did she find you?
He happened to know my mother. Yes, he just happened to know the family, and he knew that my mother had a preschool at that time, and he knew that we were both licensed and running it. So he wanted to know if I could just go and help him out until he could find somebody, because I was doing court reporting, and that ended up being a 7-year temporary position for me.
Temporary? What were you doing court reporting? Why did you come out of college as a court reporter?
So I was taking my state exams, and a health problem came up, and I stopped, but I was very nearly a certified court reporter. I'm language-based, you know what I mean?
I was going to say, do you speak a lot of languages?
I speak 2 languages, but I pick it up really quick. You know, court reporting is a whole other language.
I know.
It is a whole, like, if you're speaking, in my mind, 30 years later, I am transcripting what you're saying.
With 3 little words, 3 little letters that say the whole word or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. 3 little letters and it's a sentence.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That was like shorthand that nobody ever took, right? Or they don't do anymore.
It's shorthand. No, they still use it. I think they've shortcutted it, but basically you're still there on your stenograph and you're...
No, court reporting, but I mean shorthand is a secretary.
Oh, yeah,
she
that's
doesn't
true.
do that anymore.
No more.
Thing of the past.
Yeah.
What is that shorthand?
Yeah.
Same thing as court reporting.
It is.
Do you think that'll change too?
Court reporting, I know that they've taken out the middleman, the transcriber, and it goes straight to computer now, but I really don't know. I don't know.
In addition to all of this, working in the business world, working with preschool, in the community you served as a Watkins, with the Watkins Vital Care, which is a really important thing. Tell us about that. It's adult care, right?
Right, but our school, our adult day program is going to be geared toward adults, young adults with autism specifically. Because
adults with autism.
Right, because adult day programs right now, it's just a gathering of young adults with nowhere else to go. Their education has stopped, and their only resource really are these adult day programs.
How far do they go then?
They go till 22.
And where does it stop so that you're picking up at
22.
18?
At 22.
You mean you start at 22?
Right, we start at 22.
Wow. What happens to those people if they don't have a school? Or...
Yeah, well, they don't have a school anymore. The funding stops for school. So then now they're considered, and they've graduated, considered as graduates, and now you should be out there in the world. But they do not have the ability to hold down a job. Most of them do not. They need to be supervised still, but they're human beings. They need want to get up in the morning, just like anybody else does. They want to look forward to their day, and at the end they want to know that they've accomplished, just like anybody else does.
I know.
So we are working on we're very close actually, to setting up an adult day program geared towards individuals with autism, because their needs are different.
Is there a physical building?
Yes.
There is. Where is it located?
It's in La Crescenta.
Oh, La Crescenta.
Yeah, it's La Crescenta on Foothill.
And do they come and go by the day?
Yes, it will be a day program. It'll be a 6 to 7 hour day program.
Wow.
And they will be contributing to the community. That is the key. They're not going to be taking from the community. They are going to be contributing in whatever way they can.
So during all of this, business, preschool, court reporting, were you always thinking about writing a book? Because As the Poppies Bloomed is your first book, right?
Yeah, it's my debut
so here's
novel.
Another
Yes.
one. So here's another first for you.
Well, my daughter came home from UCSB one day, and she was a freshman, and she had been to Armenian school her whole life. And she told me, Mom, she's making such great friends. One of them specifically asked for a book that she could read to learn about the genocide. She said, Mom, what book do I take her? And at that moment, my life changed, because I was so really just angry with myself and the situation that why, 98 years later, do I not have a shelf full of novels to give a young person?
But there are novels, aren't there?
2008.
Oh, I see.
See,
Is that when it started?
Yes, there's been a wonderful influx lately.
Yes, really.
Really.
Because
I started in 2008.
Oh,
Yeah, and I
prior
did.
to that?
I gave her David Kherjian's novel, which is, a wonderful, wonderful novel. Not to say there aren't any, Rise the Euphrates, Knock at the Door, but I wanted something, an Anne Frank type of a book, where a human interest, where when you close that book, you are Anne Frank, and the end that she came to, you come to.
So that's
Viscerally, I
exactly
wanted,
right.
right.
So your main character is?
Ano and Daron, and they are two young people who live in a fictional village in the highlands of Sasun, and they want to get married. But there are many, many complications. Our traditions are one of them. You don't just choose your spouse, it's chosen for you.
This is a typical Armenian village.
Right, let's say 102 years ago,
Right,
very
okay.
typical. And also, Daron's father has a secret, and the village leader knows, and he absolutely puts his foot down.
For the marriage.
For the marriage.
And so what was your physical process of going through this? Did you go to writing classes?
I am an avid reader. Historical fiction is my love.
So you just
And
followed what? You
I
didn't
just-
go to any classes?
And my editor loved me. So,
Well, how you found an editor?
right. I have found an agent, and they put their heads together. They said this is a bold undertaking, but a very worthwhile one.
So how long did it physically take you to do
5
it?
years.
It took you 5 years?
5 years, and I traveled to the villages.
I was going to say,
yes.
how did you research it? Did you see many villages in Armenia and then put them together, or what'd you do?
So I was 3 years into my writing, and I stopped. I was like dumbstruck, and I said, "You're writing this, and you've
Were you on the
never been."
computer?
I was researching like crazy on the computer, fiction, nonfiction, memoirs, atlases. I said, "I have to go. I have to go."
So you're from an Armenian family,
Mm-hmm.
but is any of this story about your background that you've heard before?
I've incorporated certain things, 2 or 3 things in the book, and most specifically the bracelet.
Oh, that's the story of the silver bracelet.
Right, yes,
okay.
that was-
But that's part of your family tradition,
It
or
is. It's something I have. It's
Family
actually the
secret?
one thing, really.
family secret?
It's the one thing I have left from my grandmother.
So when you got to these villages, what did you do? Did you meet the people? Did you take notes? How
Oh,
did you
yes.
get them into your story?
It was
Because it's rich with
It's-
talking about the trees
Right.
and the ground and the color
Right.
of the houses.
I
and
wanted the reader to taste and smell it and be there.
things. Yes.
So what I did was we had a Kurdish driver both times, and there was a major language gap for like 2 hours, but then we
2
totally
hours?
understood each other. Yeah.
You spoke Kurdish and you spoke, but
no.
did you speak Armenian?
I speak Armenian, but he didn't. But the thing was, 2 hours in, he admitted to us that his great-grandfather was Armenian.
That was what was so great about
Right.
the story.
Right. So it was really just a homecoming, and I was really just silent, Joan, for most of the trip. I was just taking it all in, and I took it back home to me, sat in front of my computer, and continued.
So that
It
was another 2 years?
Right, for another 2 years.
And then I love to read the acknowledgments because you thank all these people for
Right.
reading them. Were they reading
Right.
it all during the time?
No, I gave them my raw manuscript, and they were just so kind, all of them. And
At the end or
at
in the beginning?
No,
Oh, at the
I was
end.
very private about my writing.
I wondered about that.
I was
yeah.
very private about it because it was something that was evolving in me for a very long time. Yeah, it was gonna.
Well, but 5 years is a long time. Your daughter graduated.
My daughter graduated.
Got
Yeah.
married, went away.
Right.
No, but really,
yeah.
because that was the beginning of it.
It was, but it was something I think that I was going to do because, you know, I grew up with my grandmother and I grew up with her stories.
Did
And
she tell you a lot of stories?
She did, weekly installments, sometimes really just too much, really, but I'm grateful that she did. And
And did you use your Armenian language
yes, my first language is Armenian.
when you were researching?
No,
and
it did me
traveling?
no good whatsoever because because you know that part of the world right now, Eastern Turkey is
So you were all in Eastern Turkey.
right.
I see.
in the villages that used to be primarily Armenian.
Oh, I see.
Right,
So,
so
you
after
didn't
the
go to
Armenian
Armenia to
genocide.
look for
No.
villages. You went to where 100 years ago they
Right,
were,
where-
before the genocide.
Right, which is today's modern day Eastern Turkey, but our historical Western Armenia.
Yeah.
So that's where our people were at that time. And
Did you fear? Did you have any fear?
actually, our guides were really very protective and very hospitable, and I was very comfortable within like a couple hours. Yeah, no, I was never fearful, but I was cautious. You know, they're Muslim, and you have to respect their.
Did you dress with a headscarf?
I didn't cover my head, but I covered my limbs at all times.
Oh yes, always.
Oh
that.
yeah. And no
Definitely.
jewelry, nothing, and just they don't make eye contact. You don't make eye contact. There are no women around during the day. It was really just me and my husband, and they were. I felt very protected. Really, they treat Western women very differently than their.
Yes, they do, don't they?
do.
There's a little bit more of a respect,
Right,
I think,
like an
than their own-
open-mindedness all of a
Yes,
sudden.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. Well, I started reading it,
Did you?
and I love it. It's a page turner.
Yes.
And I'm waiting for the silver bracelet.
Yes, really.
Thank you,
Right.
Maral.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to my email at jaquinn1@aol.com. See you next time.